Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. And this segment is going to be a really, really fascinating one. We're going to be talking to Joel L.A. Peterson. He is the founder and CEO of Student Planning Services, LLC. It's a leader and paradigm-changing provider of comprehensive supplemental educational support services. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but he also continues to be the managing partner and CEO of Peterson Advisors, LLC. Got his education at Virginia Tech, or got a BA rather from the University of Virginia, his MBA from Virginia Tech. And he has written a fascinating, highly personal story about his life called Dreams of My Mother's, a story of love transcendent. Vague introduction here, but we will get into this in its entirety. Joel, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Warner. Thanks so much.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. This book is a very, very unique personal story. We'll get into sort of the plot and what it is really all about, but lots of things going on within the book itself. Tell our Lewis at Large listeners a little bit more about what you do professionally, besides being an author here of this particular sort of somewhat autobiographical work that you've done. Tell us what you do professionally.
Professionally, on the Peterson Advisors side, we do merger and acquisition consulting and strategic business advising, primarily with multinational and cross-border companies. And on the student planning services side, we provide education support services, everything from tutoring to academic mentoring to academic planning and management, test preparation services, college admissions advising, but all in a coordinated single one-stop shop so that parents don't have to try to manage that whole process themselves when they don't have the time or the expertise.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the journey that brought you here, encased rather in the work Dreams of My Mother's, mothers being a key word there. Share with us, do this if you would. Give us a short synopsis of sort of what everything that's going on in here, and then we'll dive into some detail.
Sure. Essentially, this is sort of an ultimate story of identity, and I used events from my life because I think I have some unique experiences as a backdrop and a stage. So this is not a memoir, it's not an autobiography, but does use events from my life to create a story about two women, mothers, from opposite ends of the world, literally and figuratively, in the human condition, and the journey that they take, and the discoveries, the triumphs, and the redemptions that they ultimately end up reaching as they end up on opposite sides of a rare international adoption situation. And although that's a rare human experience, not that many people are involved in adoptions, especially international ones, but within it is contained essentially everything that is most powerful and most heartfelt and deeply held within the human experience. Family, love, loss, tragedy, and joy and gain and triumph.
What, again, the multicultural aspects are fascinating to me, as well as just the very beginning. You were born in underdeveloped post-Civil War Korea. To a young, destitute peasant woman and an American serviceman. Let's start there. Share your early years, and then tell us what happens when you turn 6 years old.
So my mother, out of desperation and in extremely destitute circumstances, had turned to prostitution, and I was the outcome of that. And so growing up at the poorest end of society, in a society that itself was on the poorest end of the global spectrum of societies, was obviously a very challenging and daunting situation. Put on top of that, I was racially mixed, and so immediately identified her. I was sort of her living, breathing Scarlet A, as it were, at a time in Korea's history when there was not much acceptance of this kind of thing, and in most societies there really isn't. You could probably a parallel to try to put it to American terms would be, if you think of a poor, uneducated, white Southern woman, say in 1926, with a half African American illegitimate child living in Selma, Alabama. Not that Selma, Alabama is a bad place. I'm just trying to put some context for Americans. So those are the kind of circumstances that I was in. And then eventually my mother came to the realization that there was very little future for me given the circumstances of my birth and of the current condition. And when I was almost 7 years old, she put me up for international adoption, and I was adopted by a Midwestern family.
Where was the American serviceman father? Where was he in your life through all this?
He wasn't at all. I have no idea who he is.
Okay. To this day, you don't know?
No, I don't. The adoption papers from the Korean Adoption Agency do specify that at the time she was pregnant, that she was cohabitating with him until she was 8 months pregnant, and then he disappeared.
Joel, like all those, and again, if you just joined us, we're talking to Joel Peterson, a brand new work, a really, really fascinating autobiography here called Dreams of My Mothers, A Story of Love Transcendent. Joel has just talked to us about his birth in post-Civil War Korea, and then his ultimate adoption at age 6, right before his 7th birthday, to an American family. Any desire on your part, or tell us about thoughts you've had about trying to find out who your biological father is?
No real desire. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful man as father, in the form of my adopted father, and really, I'm not sure what the point would be to at this stage in my life to try to find out
right.
Any of this information. And I'm not sure where I would start.
Right. All right. So tell us, you're adopted between your 6th and 7th birthday. Tell us about what happens to you next.
Well, so I go from a backward third world country where I was living with no running water and no electricity, and then I get on a jet and I arrive into Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport on a very cold January night, and meet my new family. They are classic Midwestern people, wonderful people, third generation Swedish American, and they had. I've got a brother and 3 sisters, all who are biological children of my adoptive parents, and I got to be raised and live a classic Middle America, heartland of the U.S. kind of life from that point forward.
Joel, at 6 years old, young, yes, but you knew who your biological mother was. You had a relationship there. She was mommy to you, so to speak. Do you remember her taking you to the airport, and do you remember at all how she described what was going on with you and why it was happening?
Absolutely. Again, she explained to me that there was just really no future, and that one of the things that people don't realize is that until quite recently, well into the 1990s, under Korean law, if you did not have a Korean father, you were not a Korean citizen. So when I was a child, I was not a citizen of South Korea, nor a citizen of any country on the planet. And so you can think of now, I'm a mixed-race child in an environment where you're destitute and you're not even a citizen of the country. I didn't even have rights to be educated. And so clearly she made an enormous sacrifice. So I understood what was going on. Obviously, no child wants to leave their mother, the only person that they've known in their life. And so it was an extremely difficult and transition. Again, I use this, my experiences in the story, but again, it's not a autobiographical story, but it's really to focus on not my life, but the lives of of these two women, depicted based on the characters and the people of my biological mother and my adoptive mother.
Joel, tell us about contact that you've had with your biological mother over the years.
Well, that's a great question. I was fortunate enough that I was a Rotary International Exchange student when I was for my last year of high school, and I went to Japan. And I was close enough that I actually was able to go to Korea and ultimately find my biological mother after years and years of separation, based solely on the last thing that she had given me, which was a necklace and pendant that had, in Korean writing, engraved on it was our last known address and her name and my name. And based on that alone, I was able to ultimately find her and reunite with her when I was 18.
Tell us about that reunion. Tell us about that moment. Did she know it was coming? And if not, tell us how the whole thing transpired.
She did know it was coming because I had to first kind of track her down and then set up a meeting location, and then she had so we had arranged that. But at the same time, when the meeting actually happened, it really was a moment of epiphany for me, and I use that moment and describe it for the characters in the book. And so I don't want to spoil what's in there, but it was fascinating to be able to still have that little boy inside of me that felt everything that I had felt when she was everything in my world. At the same time, though, I was this other person now. I was this American. I was this 18-year-old young man, and I was able to look through and couldn't stop seeing the world from a typical middle American kind of perspective.
Right.
And
did that, when you went back and saw her, what undoubtedly, well, I'll let you describe it, but going through your mind must have been, what if I was still here, on and on and on and on and on, all the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. I'm curious, as you left there to come home, what your thoughts were.
What my thoughts really came ultimately down to was, all young people struggle as they go through their teenage years with with identity. Who am I? Who am I going to be? I'm not my parents. I'm going to be me, but who is me? And mine was more complex, and I struggled probably more than some teenagers would. And certainly up until that point, I had a lot of struggles. Because in America, if you're not 100% white, then you're seen as something other and something strange and something different, and that's not always a positive thing in some people's eyes. And in Korea, too, I was not seen as Korean. I was seen as something different and other. And that reunion helped cement in my mind that my identity really was just simply that I was clearly and obviously an American. And that's really how I see myself to this day. America is about embracing a set of ideals and a set of beliefs that we all strive for. We're not perfect as a country in that, but there is a unique identity that we all share as Americans, not based on genetics, not based on biology, but based on a set of ideals and beliefs that we all share.
If you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. We're talking to Joel L.A. Peterson. He is the founder and CEO of Student Planning Services, a leader and paradigm-changing provider of comprehensive supplemental educational support services. He also is the managing partner and CEO of Pintoresco Advisors. He got his education at Virginia Tech and a BA at the University of Virginia. All that interesting and probably fodder for a completely different show, but we're talking specifically today about a work he has penned, an extraordinary story, human story, called Dreams of My Mother's, a story of love transcendent. Born in post-war Korea to an American serviceman and a peasant Korean woman, and then later in life, young life, adopted by an American family. Joel, I'm curious as to, again, some of this book is far more than adoption. It's multicultural, it's identity, it's probably some resolution and sort of closing of the circle, so to speak. When you talk to others Is this a story of adoption? And if it is, what's the headline from it to you? What's the lesson from it?
Well, it's really not a story of adoption. Just like many times we can have a story that talks about or uses a circumstance as a frame, but inside of adoption and inside of something like transcultural, transnational, and transracial adoption, it really ends up being a lens that focuses on the most cherished and closely held human values, human emotions, and human passions. You cannot have adoption without there's some sort of a tragedy or tragic circumstance. You cannot have an adoption without somebody having enormous joy at gaining a child. And you can't have adoption without issues of identity. And when you have different cultures and racial mix-up, then it speaks to what we as a nation today seem to be continuing to struggle with. We still continue to struggle with race and how that affects our American identity. You know, we have for the first time ever a biracial person in the White House as our president. And we as a country not sure quite how to necessarily deal with that. And so I believe this book, through this lens of the story and the circumstances, will help bring focus and hopefully some new insight and move the dialogue a little bit further in a positive direction with regard to some of these very core human issues that we have.
What about how has this changed or affected any view that you have on immigration right now?
Well, obviously, me being an immigrant
Right.
does affect my view of immigration, but mainly in the sense that we are a nation of immigrants. I don't believe that we have people who are anti-immigrant. It seems to be the real questions come down to is how is the best way to manage immigration, and what do we do with the inevitable situations when there hasn't been when an immigrant comes not through normal processes. I think that seems to be the more debate. I don't really believe people have an issue fundamentally with having immigration. It's just about how it should be done. What do we do when people have come outside of the given rules that we have established?
Joel, what about as you look down the road? And again, there's a lot packed into this book. It's an extraordinary work. But what about plans for you to keep in touch at some level with your biological mother? Is that still part of it, or was that trip there kind of a closing of that circle, so to speak, and moving forward?
We did keep in touch, but not in a close way. I mean, one of the great things and the remarkable nature of who she was, and in a completely different kind of parallel, the incredible, remarkable woman that my adopted mother was, is that she made it very clear, my biological mother did, that I was a child. I was the passive object of my life. I was not in control. I was not in any decision making, and she made decisions, and she lived with those, and she very clearly pointed out that my duties and obligations, where I was and my family now, was in America, and that's where I needed to focus, and that keeping in touch with her was more about just doing the human right thing for both of us, but not about trying to go ahead and complicate what was my responsibilities as a son and a family member here.
So she, in essence, launched your ship and was willing to stay, so to speak, back at port and let you go explore other worlds and other lives.
Exactly, which I think is incredibly noble and incredibly sacrificing. And I've talked to and know of many adoptees who have reunited with their biological parents with mixed results. Some have turned out great. Others, it's been a very complicating and sometimes disappointing circumstance. And I was very, very fortunate to have a courageous biological mother that not only made some extremely difficult decisions at the time, but then stuck by them and abided by them and did everything in the spirit and faith that she herself had.
Yeah, I would agree completely. That is an extraordinary sacrifice on her part. I am kind of curious, just as a matter of fact, does she have a family now? Did she evolve into and either get married or have other children, or do you know any of that?
She did not remarry, and She actually became a woman of faith. She turned to became a kind of a Buddhist novitiate, and spent the rest of her life living at a monastery.
What about your the relationship with your current family? Are both your parents still alive?
Unfortunately, my adopted mother passed away some years ago, and my biological mother has also passed away. But my father is still alive, and I have a great relationship with my brother and sisters, and the extended family of nieces and nephews, and so forth. And the number one question that I used to get was people asking, why would your parents adopt? I mean, they had 4 children already. They had both genders. What was the reason? What's the point? And it really speaks to extraordinary elements of my parents, and particularly my mother, who saw it as her Christian duty and the call of her faith, that she could not be true to what she was saying every day at church and Sunday services, and not do this adoption.
Joel, have you, over time, either through circumstance or by your own searching, have you found others that have come from similar situations, maybe not necessarily from Korea, but maybe either from Vietnam or from anywhere, frankly, and relocated in America in a situation like yours?
The answer is yes, I have. Korea particularly pioneered and was really the leading source of international adoptee children. Approximately 150,000 children from Korea were adopted, mostly into the United States, mostly by Midwest white families, the upper Midwest being the primary destination. And then since sort of the late 90s, there's been a decline from Korea, but then there was an uptick from places like China and Vietnam, as you point out, and other places. Again, where I was a little more unique still is that there's some research that points out that of that 150,000 Korean children adopted, only about 5,000 were mixed race. And so it creates a very different dynamic being of a mixed race situation than necessarily of being a pure one race and coming into another situation.
Joel, as we start to wind down here, I'm just curious, based on your experience and what you see now, being adopted in the manner in which you were, particularly as an immigrant, so to speak, do you find the laws currently and the opportunities here to do something like your experience is easier or harder? And should there be any changes either in the laws or the process?
The adoption laws have changed. In 2008, the United States signed on to the Hague Convention on protection of children and transborder adoption situations. And in an effort to protect children and to ensure that minimize any illegal human trafficking, it has made cross-border adoptions more difficult, and there are certain voices that are critical of that, others who think that is the right thing. In terms of a broader sense of what America's society's norms and laws do, is I don't believe that the story that I write in the book or my personal story could have happened anywhere else in the world. The U.S. is fraught with imperfections, but we still have the most open, least stratified society that I've been privileged to travel all over the world, and I personally know this for a fact, and I could not have reached the successes that I have and the journey that I've walked except here. And I'm hoping that the laws going forward, will continue to give opportunities to destitute children who otherwise may not have had the opportunities that I've had.
Again, the work is called Dreams of My Mother's, A Story of Love Transcended. It is published by Huff Publishing Associates out of Minneapolis, the author Joel L.A. Peterson. Joel, how can people find out more about the story, this extraordinary story, and get a copy of the book?
They can go to the website, dreamsofmymothers.com. Mothers is plural. And it is now in full release, commercial hardcover and softcover, available at Amazon.com and available at any bookstore. If they don't carry it, just simply ask them to order it, and they'll do it, or you can order it online.
Well, we appreciate you taking part of your day to share the story with us, and thanks so much, and best of luck going forward.
Warner, thank you. My pleasure.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.